The morning unfolded just like any other in my quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac. The familiar sounds of birds chirping blended with the rhythmic hiss of sprinklers firing across manicured lawns. Neighbors exchanged polite waves from their driveways, each pretending not to notice the other too closely. I was enjoying a rare peaceful moment, coffee in hand, seated on my porch when I spotted her, Karen. She was unmistakable, the very picture of suburban authority. Her hair was styled into a flawless bob, oversized sunglasses masked half her face, and in one hand she clutched a clipboard like it was a badge of honor, Starbucks cup balanced in the other. Karen had self-assigned herself as the HOA's unofficial enforcer, patrolling our block like a hawk on the hunt for violations. From the day I moved in 2 years ago, she'd seemed to single me out. Whether it was my mailbox being a shade too cream instead of the regulation eggshell, or my recycling bins peeking out from behind the side gate, Karen always found something to report. But that morning, my focus was elsewhere. Just the day before, I'd returned from a court hearing that ended a drawn-out property line dispute with my back neighbor. I'd won, finally, but the judge had issued a condition. As part of the ruling, I had to post official notices along the property line until a survey crew could come out and mark the boundary permanently. I was handed a stack of bright neon orange and blue stickers, each marked in bold, "Notice of pending survey, do not remove." So, late that night, flashlight in hand, I walked the fence line, placing the stickers exactly as instructed. It wasn't subtle, but it was court-mandated, and my neighbor's displeasure was not my problem. The next morning, coffee still in hand, I watched as Karen marched across the lawn with unnerving purpose. She stopped at the first sticker and stared at it, her hands settling on her hips in dramatic disbelief. Then, with a slight grunt of indignation, she peeled the sticker clean off the fence post. I nearly dropped my mug. Without a second thought, I rushed toward her. She froze, still holding the crumpled notice in her perfectly manicured fingers. I could barely catch my breath as I confronted her, but her expression didn't waver. With her chin lifted high, she looked down her nose and declared the notice an eyesore, confidently citing some obscure section from the HOA's aesthetic guidelines. My jaw clenched. She was holding a legal notice, something issued by the county clerk's office, and dismissing it like it was a tacky flyer. She reached for the next one with visible satisfaction, her lips curling in a smug smile. This wasn't about community standards anymore, this was personal. I kept my voice steady and warned her that removing even one more sticker meant tampering with a legal court order. She looked at me like I just claimed to be in the FBI. Her scoff said it all. "Please," she sniffed. "I've been on the HOA board for 12 years. I know what's allowed on fences. Neon orange is definitely not allowed." My patience snapped. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photo I'd taken at the courthouse, an image of the signed order, complete with explicit instructions about posting the notices. I held it up, hoping reality might finally sink in. She gave it a lazy glance and dismissed it with a wave, as if the county court had no say here. "I don't care what that says," she said coldly. "This is private property. And you agreed to the HOA charter when you moved in." And with that, she turned back toward the fence, her fingers hovering over the next sticker like she was itching to rip it down, just to prove she could. Karen's voice was sharp, unyielding. "That means no stickers, no signs, and certainly nothing this hideous," she snapped, gesturing toward the bright orange notice like it was radioactive. I could hardly believe it, my jaw practically hit the grass. This woman genuinely thought HOA bylaws trumped a legal order. I took a breath, steadying my voice. "Karen," I said slowly, deliberately, "you don't outrank a judge. The HOA doesn't outrank a judge. That's the law." She didn't flinch. Arms crossed, she raised an eyebrow and said coolly, "We have our own bylaws. If you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't live here." That was it. I tapped the record button on my phone's camera and pointed it right at her. "Go ahead," I said, "say that again while you rip down a court-ordered notice. I'll send it straight to the judge." For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Her hand froze mid-air, fingers still hovering near the next sticker. Her mouth tightened. "You're being ridiculous," she muttered, but she dropped the sticker and backed away just slightly. I kept the camera steady on her as she floundered, suddenly unsure. I'll bring this up at the next board meeting," she blurted, as if the HOA board could somehow override a county courthouse. "Please do," I replied, voice calm but firm. "And while you're at it, talk to a lawyer." She glared at me with icy defiance, then turned sharply and stomped off down the sidewalk, heels clacking like gunfire. As she muttered something about unsightly behavior and lack of community spirit, I just stood there, heart still pounding, watching her disappear around the corner. When she was gone, I turned back to the fence and carefully smoothed out the sticker she'd crumpled. This wasn't over, not even close. By the end of the week, the story had made its way through the neighborhood grapevine. The sticker showdown, as someone jokingly called it, had become the week's hot gossip. When the HOA board meeting finally rolled around, I walked into the clubhouse with a folder tucked under my arm, filled with copies of the judge's signed order. Karen was already seated at the head of the long folding table, surrounded by her usual allies, two women with identical tight smiles and a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When she spotted me, Karen gave a tight, smug smile. I could have sworn I heard her mutter something under her breath. The meeting opened with the usual procedural fluff, the Pledge of Allegiance, a quick run-through of the budget, but Karen didn't waste time. She cleared her throat and with exaggerated seriousness declared, "We have an urgent matter to address regarding a clear violation of community aesthetic standards at Lot 14. Every face turned toward me. She launched into her presentation with gusto, pulling out a stack of glossy photos, evidence she must have gathered after our confrontation. She passed them down the table like she was submitting exhibits in a trial. "As you can see," she said dramatically, "these garish stickers deface the otherwise harmonious appearance of our neighborhood. Neon orange, blue, and black, completely outside of HOA guidelines." I removed one myself, but was met with open hostility. I bit the inside of my cheek, holding back the urge to laugh. She ended with a flourish, like a prosecutor at closing arguments. "I move that we issue a formal violation and fine Lot 14 until the offending stickers are removed." That was my cue. I stood, holding my folder. "Before you vote," I said evenly, "you may want to take a look at these." I stepped forward and handed out copies of the official court order to each board member. "This document is signed by a county judge. These notices are required to remain posted until the survey crew completes their work. Removing them violates a court directive, and anyone who does could be held in contempt." The room fell silent, the only sound the quiet rustle of pages turning. One board member adjusted her glasses and actually read the document. The man at the end shot Karen a look that was all eyebrows and silent disbelief. Karen, for once, had no words. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, sputtering as the reality of the situation began to settle around her like a fog. Ask ChatGPT. "Well, be that as it may, the aesthetic, Karen began again, clinging to her last thread of control. But I cut her off. "The aesthetic doesn't override a court order," I said firmly. "Unless you're volunteering to pay the fines when the judge finds out someone tampered with official notices." That landed. Karen's face drained of color, her mouth twitching as she tried to find a comeback. Before she could, the woman with the glasses cleared her throat and spoke with quiet authority. "It seems Lot 14 is in compliance with the court's directive," she said. "We can't override that." The room fell silent. Karen's jaw locked in silent fury as her motion fizzled without even a second. I sank back into my seat, doing my best to suppress the grin threatening to spread across my face. Round 1 was mine. But I had no illusions, Karen wasn't finished. Not even close. For a few days after the board meeting, the cul-de-sac returned to a cautious peace. The stickers remained untouched, and Karen suddenly had more important things to do whenever I passed by. For a moment, I almost believed the whole ordeal had passed. I should have known better. Saturday morning arrived with a sharp knock at the front door. I opened it to find a uniformed sheriff's deputy standing on my porch, a folded document in hand. "Morning," he said. "Are you the owner of Lot 14? My heart sank. "Yes." "Is something wrong?" Without drama, he handed over the paper. "You've been served. Complaint from the Homeowners Association." I unfolded it right there. It was an official notice of violation, again, and a small claim suit filed by the HOA for unpaid fines. Karen had followed through with her threat and filed it herself. The deputy offered a sympathetic nod. "Just doing my job," he said before turning and walking back to his cruiser. I stood in stunned silence, the paper flapping slightly in the morning breeze. It wasn't until I sat down at the kitchen table and read the fine print that the anger finally hit. Karen was claiming over $1,500 in fines, citing the same so-called violations she already knew were legally protected. It was harassment, plain and simple. I picked up my phone and called my attorney. When I explained everything, she actually chuckled. "Oh, she really stepped in at this time," she said. "We'll file a countersuit for harassment and seek damages. Keep every shred of documentation." By the time the court hearing arrived a month later, I was armed with a binder thick with evidence, printed court orders, time-stamped photos, and the video of Karen peeling the sticker while declaring the HOA trumped a judge. Karen arrived dressed to kill, pearls on, clipboard in hand, striding into the courtroom like she owned it. But her performance fell apart fast. When the judge asked her for evidence of my supposed violations, all she could produce were outdated HOA bylaws and a few photos of the stickers. I handed over my organized packet, and the judge took his time reviewing every page. Finally, he peered over his glasses and looked at her. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "these notices were issued under my authority. Removing them could be considered contempt of court. The defendant is not in violation of any law or covenant. On the contrary, you owe him an apology." Karen's mouth fell open, stunned into silence. The judge didn't stop there. On my lawyer's motion, he ordered her to cover my legal fees. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of weeks finally lift. Karen passed me in the hallway, her eyes shooting daggers, but this time I knew, the game was up. Whatever authority she thought she had, it wasn't enough to bend the law. Not anymore.